Don't skip. Your soulmate just heard the truth about you, and it changed everything. Don't skip. Listen carefully. The morning began with the quiet beauty that often goes unnoticed. Golden rays of sunlight slipped gently through the curtains, filling the room with warmth. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs that echoed through the neighborhood. The corner bakery opened its doors before dawn, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles while watering colorful gardens. Everything seemed wonderfully ordinary. Nothing suggested that this peaceful morning would quietly become one of the most meaningful days of someone's life. Because your heart needs this right now, because life's greatest lessons often begin in the quietest moments. For many years, someone had formed opinions based on appearances. Not because they wanted to be unfair. Not because they lacked compassion. But because they rarely paused long enough to discover the full story behind another person's life. Like many people, they assumed they understood others after only seeing a few moments of their journey. Yet deep inside, they sometimes wondered how many beautiful stories remained hidden beneath the surface. That question quietly stayed with them. Because your heart needs this right now, because every person carries a story that deserves understanding. That morning, while preparing breakfast, they found themselves thinking about kindness. A warm cup of tea rested beside the kitchen window. Steam curled gently into the cool morning air. Instead of rushing into another busy day, they simply watched life unfold outside. A father patiently helped his daughter tie her shoes. An elderly neighbor stopped to help someone whose grocery bag had broken. A young couple laughed together while walking their dog. Simple moments. Small acts of kindness. Nothing dramatic. Yet those ordinary scenes reminded them that true character is often revealed through quiet daily actions rather than grand gestures. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine goodness is usually found in everyday choices. After breakfast, they reached for an old notebook resting quietly on a nearby shelf. Its cover had faded with time. Inside were years of handwritten reflections. Dreams that had once seemed impossible. Questions that had slowly found answers. Prayers whispered during uncertain nights. Lessons learned after difficult seasons. Turning each page felt like revisiting earlier versions of themselves. The hopeful version. The discouraged version. The impatient version. The version that believed every problem needed an immediate solution. And the version slowly learning that wisdom often arrives through patience. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth is built one lesson at a time. Opening to a blank page, they slowly wrote a simple question. How often do I truly know another person's whole story? For several moments they stared at the page. Then another sentence quietly followed. Perhaps people are carrying battles I cannot see. Reading those words stirred something deep within them. Not because they suddenly understood everything, but because they realized understanding begins with humility. Because your heart needs this right now, because compassion grows when we admit we don't know everything. Later that morning, they decided to visit the familiar park that had become a place of quiet reflection. The towering oak trees stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through the branches. The peaceful lake reflected drifting white clouds like polished glass. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children chased butterflies through blooming gardens. Everything invited them to slow down. They found their favorite wooden bench overlooking the lake. Instead of searching for answers, they simply watched life. Because your heart needs this right now, because peaceful hearts often notice truths that busy minds overlook. Nearby, a little boy accidentally dropped his toy boat into the water. He looked ready to cry. His grandfather calmly reached down with a long branch and gently pulled the toy back to shore. The child smiled with relief. "Weren't you upset?" he asked. The grandfather laughed softly. "No. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is helping each other, not blaming each other." Those words quietly settled into their heart. How often had people judged someone before offering understanding? How often had assumptions replaced compassion? Because your heart needs this right now, because mercy often builds stronger relationships than judgment. As the morning slowly became afternoon, they wandered along the lakeside path. An elderly woman sat beneath a flowering tree writing in a small journal. Curious, they smiled politely. She smiled back. After a few moments she quietly said, "I've learned something after many years." "What is it?" they asked. She gently closed her notebook. The truth usually takes longer to arrive than assumptions. But it's always worth waiting for. Those simple words stayed with them long after they continued walking. Because your heart needs this right now, because patience protects us from many unnecessary misunderstandings. Later they entered the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender bloomed beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully removed tiny weeds from between healthy flowers. Curious, they asked, "Why spend so much time removing such little weeds?" The gardener smiled warmly. Because little problems become bigger if ignored. Those words echoed inside. Misunderstandings often begin as small assumptions. Silence allows them to grow. Honest conversations remove them before they spread. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships require continual care. The afternoon breeze carried gentle violin music through the park. Only a handful of visitors paused to listen. Still, every note was played with remarkable care. Watching the musician reminded them that beautiful things rarely demand attention. Integrity grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Forgiveness grows quietly. Trust grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting influence is often gentle rather than loud. Returning once again to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook. Today's page quickly filled. Today I realized something important. The truth about a person is rarely found in one conversation. It is revealed through consistent kindness. Through integrity. through humility. Through the way they treat people when no one is watching. Perhaps the greatest mistake we make is believing we already know someone's heart. Reading those words brought quiet peace. The world suddenly felt a little gentler. Because your heart needs this right now, because choosing understanding creates room for compassion. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families folded picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected on the title of this story. Don't skip. Your soulmate just heard the truth about you. And it changed everything. A gentle smile crossed their face. The story was never really about a dramatic revelation. It wasn't about a mystical prediction. It wasn't about discovering a hidden secret overnight. It was about what happens when someone stops believing assumptions and starts looking for the deeper truth in another person's character. That kind of understanding has the power to transform relationships. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows through truth, patience, and compassion. That evening, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will choose understanding before judgment. Tomorrow I will listen before assuming. Tomorrow I will notice quiet acts of kindness. Tomorrow I will appreciate people more openly. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone who values truth, integrity, humility, and compassion." They paused before writing one final reflection. Today I learned that the greatest truths are rarely dramatic. They are found in everyday acts of honesty, kindness, patience, and love. When we take time to truly know another person's heart instead of relying on assumptions, we create relationships built on trust rather than misunderstanding. Those quiet choices become the foundation of a meaningful life. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer rushed to conclusions. Because they had discovered that the truth, when approached with patience and compassion, has the power to change not only how we see others, but also how we live. And listen to this. The next morning arrived with the same gentle sunrise that had greeted countless mornings before. Golden light slowly spread across the room. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed another beautiful day with cheerful songs. Outside, the neighborhood slowly awakened. The corner bakery opened before sunrise, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of warm bread. Children hurried toward school with backpacks bouncing behind them. Neighbors smiled while watering colorful gardens. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. Yesterday's reflections refused to fade. Instead of wondering whether the truth would be painful, they found themselves asking a different question. What if the truth brings understanding instead of fear? Because your heart needs this right now, because truth often builds bridges where assumptions build walls. Before beginning the day, they reached once again for the familiar notebook resting beside the window. Its worn cover carried the marks of many seasons. Inside were dreams once thought impossible. Questions that had slowly found answers. Mistakes that had become valuable lessons. Pages filled with gratitude after difficult days. They turned to yesterday's final entry. The greatest truths are revealed through consistent kindness. They smiled softly. Yesterday those words felt encouraging. Today they felt deeply personal. Because your heart needs this right now, because wisdom becomes meaningful when it begins changing the way we live. After breakfast they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak tree welcomed another peaceful morning. Gentle breezes danced through its branches. The calm lake reflected drifting white clouds like polished glass. Families gathered beneath the shade. Children laughed while feeding ducks along the shoreline. Everything invited them to slow down. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the water, they quietly sat. For the first time in many weeks. They weren't searching for dramatic answers. They were simply learning how to observe with an open heart. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace grows when we stop demanding immediate answers. Nearby, an elderly couple quietly shared breakfast together. They spoke very little. Occasionally they smiled. Sometimes they simply watched the lake. After several peaceful minutes, the husband gently said, "You still make ordinary days feel special." His wife smiled warmly. "So do you." No dramatic declaration. No elaborate speech. Only sincere appreciation. Watching them reminded the person that meaningful relationships are strengthened by simple words spoken consistently over time. Because your heart needs this right now, because appreciation keeps love alive. As they continued walking, they noticed an elderly carpenter carefully repairing an old wooden bridge crossing a quiet stream. Curious, they stopped. "Wouldn't it be easier to replace the bridge?" they asked. The carpenter smiled kindly. "It would. But strong foundations deserve another chance." Those words quietly echoed inside. Relationships often need restoration. Trust sometimes needs rebuilding. Understanding sometimes needs renewing. Patience sometimes needs practicing again. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting relationships are maintained through continual care. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed a father teaching his young daughter how to skip stones across the water. The first stone sank immediately. The second skipped once. The third skipped 3 times. The little girl laughed. "I finally did it." Her father smiled proudly. "You kept trying." Those simple words lingered. Healthy communication works the same way. Not every conversation goes perfectly. Not every misunderstanding disappears immediately. But every sincere effort teaches us how to love more wisely. Because your heart needs this right now, because progress grows through patience rather than perfection. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "How do you know which flowers need extra attention?" The gardener smiled warmly. "I pay attention every day. If I only visited once in a while, I'd miss the signs." Those simple words settled deeply into their heart. People are much the same. Sometimes someone doesn't need advice. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to notice they aren't doing as well as they pretend. Because your heart needs this right now, because careful listening is one of the greatest gifts we can offer. The afternoon breeze carried soft violin music through the park. Only a handful of visitors paused to listen. Still, every melody was played beautifully. Watching the musician reminded them that beautiful things rarely seek attention. Kindness works quietly. Integrity works quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because the strongest influences are often gentle rather than loud. Returning once again to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook. Today's page slowly filled with fresh reflections. Today I realized something important. Truth isn't something to fear. Truth helps us understand people more deeply. Assumptions create distance. Honest conversations create connection. Real character is revealed through daily choices, not dramatic moments. Reading those words brought unexpected peace. Not because every question had been answered, but because they finally trusted the direction they were walking. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding begins when we replace judgment with curiosity. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Don't skip. Your soulmate just heard the truth about you, and it changed everything. A gentle smile crossed their face. The greatest truth wasn't a hidden secret. It wasn't a shocking revelation. It wasn't something meant to create fear. The real truth was discovering the quiet beauty of a person's character through kindness, honesty, humility, patience, and compassion. That realization changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows when people take time to truly know one another. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will choose understanding before assumption. Tomorrow I will speak with honesty and kindness. Tomorrow I will appreciate the quiet goodness in others. Tomorrow I will forgive more quickly. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone who values truth, compassion, humility, and hope." They paused before writing one final reflection. Today I discovered that the most meaningful truths are rarely dramatic. They are found in everyday moments, acts of kindness, words of encouragement, patient listening, honest conversations, and hearts willing to understand rather than judge. Those quiet choices become the foundation of trust, lasting relationships, and genuine peace. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer rushed to conclusions. Because they had discovered that truth, approached with humility and compassion, has the power to strengthen hearts, restore trust, and inspire hope. Several peaceful mornings had passed since everything began to change. Nothing extraordinary had happened. There had been no dramatic confrontation. No mysterious letter. No unbelievable coincidence. Instead, life continued with its familiar rhythm. The sun still rose slowly above the horizon. Birds still greeted the dawn with cheerful songs. The neighborhood bakery still filled the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children still laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors still smiled while tending their gardens. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet inside one heart, everything felt different. The questions that once created fear had slowly become lessons that inspired wisdom. Because your heart needs this right now, because true growth often happens quietly, long before anyone else notices. That morning they prepared breakfast slowly. Steam rose gently from a warm cup of tea resting beside the window. Instead of rushing into another busy day, they simply watched the morning unfold. Golden sunlight stretched across the trees. Tiny drops of dew sparkled like diamonds upon the grass. A robin landed on the fence before flying toward the nearby park. Across the street, an elderly man smiled as he carefully planted new flowers. Everything felt peaceful. For the first time in a very long while, they weren't searching for answers. They were learning to appreciate the present. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often begins when gratitude becomes stronger than worry. After breakfast they reached once again for the familiar notebook. The cover had become worn after years of faithful use. Inside were countless pages filled with dreams, prayers, questions, disappointments, victories, gratitude, and hope. Turning those pages felt like walking through every season of life. There were pages filled with uncertainty. Pages written through tears. Pages celebrating joyful moments. And pages reminding them that every difficult chapter eventually became part of a greater story. They smiled softly. Growth had never happened overnight. It happened one choice at a time. One lesson at a time. One conversation at a time. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting change is built through small, faithful decisions. Opening to a fresh page, they slowly wrote. Today I choose trust. For several moments they simply looked at those words. Then they continued writing. Not blind trust, but trust built through honesty, patience, and understanding. Reading those sentences filled them with quiet confidence. They realized trust is not created by dramatic promises. It grows through consistent actions repeated day after day. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust is strengthened by integrity more than words alone. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park. The old oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches swayed gently beneath the summer breeze. Sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while chasing butterflies through the flower gardens. Everything invited them to slow down. They found the familiar wooden bench overlooking the lake. Instead of wondering what tomorrow might bring, they simply appreciated today. Because your heart needs this right now, because contentment often begins when we stop trying to control every outcome. Nearby, a young boy carefully built a sandcastle beside his grandmother. Each time a small wave washed away one corner, he patiently rebuilt it. Finally he sighed. It keeps falling apart. His grandmother smiled kindly. But look how much better you're becoming at building it. The child looked at the castle again. This time he smiled. He hadn't noticed how much he had learned. Watching them reminded the person that relationships often grow the same way. Every misunderstanding teaches patience. Every apology teaches humility. Every honest conversation teaches trust. Because your heart needs this right now, because even difficult experiences can become opportunities to grow. As the morning slowly became afternoon, they wandered through the community garden. Rows of colorful roses stretched beneath the warm sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully trimmed small branches from a healthy tree. Curious, they asked, "Why remove healthy branches?" The gardener smiled warmly. "So the tree can become even stronger." Those words settled gently into their heart. Sometimes growth requires letting go. Letting go of fear. Letting go of resentment. Letting go of assumptions. Making room for wisdom. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy hearts continue growing by releasing what no longer serves them. Later they walked beside the peaceful lake. A young violinist quietly played gentle melodies beneath a maple tree. Only a few people stopped to listen. Still, every note was played with remarkable care. Watching the musician reminded them that many of life's greatest gifts happen quietly. Patience grows quietly. Kindness grows quietly. Forgiveness grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they become powerful enough to transform lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet goodness often leaves the deepest impact. Returning once more to the familiar wooden bench, they opened the notebook again. Today's page quickly filled with fresh reflections. Today I discovered something beautiful. The truth about another person isn't found in one conversation. It's discovered through their everyday character. Kindness revealed consistently. Integrity demonstrated quietly. Compassion shown without expecting recognition. Those are the truths that truly matter. Reading those words filled them with quiet joy. The burden they had once carried had become something different. Wisdom. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows when we choose to see people through compassion instead of assumption. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families packed picnic baskets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Don't skip. Your soulmate just heard the truth about you, and it changed everything. They smiled gently. The greatest truth had never been a shocking revelation. It wasn't a hidden secret. It wasn't something dramatic. It was the realization that true character is revealed through everyday kindness, honesty, humility, patience, and compassion. Those quiet qualities had changed the way they saw another person. And in doing so, they had also changed themselves. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding another person often begins by becoming a wiser person ourselves. As evening settled across the neighborhood, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will continue choosing understanding before judgment. Tomorrow I will continue listening before assuming. Tomorrow I will continue expressing appreciation while I have the chance. Tomorrow I will continue building trust through honesty and kindness. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose heart reflects compassion, humility, gratitude, and hope." They paused before writing one final reflection. "Today I learned that the most meaningful truths are rarely loud. They are found in everyday acts of love, quiet integrity, patient listening, sincere forgiveness, and consistent kindness. When we choose to understand people rather than judge them, we create relationships rooted in trust instead of fear. Those ordinary choices quietly become extraordinary over time." They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared what the truth might reveal. Because they had discovered that truth, when received with humility and compassion, has the power to heal hearts, strengthen relationships, and inspire hope. And listen to this. The final morning arrived with a quiet sense of peace unlike any morning before. The first rays of sunlight slowly slipped through the curtains, painting the room in warm shades of gold. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain, blooming flowers, and newly cut grass. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. Outside, life continued with its familiar rhythm. The neighborhood bakery opened before dawn, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of warm bread. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors waved to one another while tending colorful gardens. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, something extraordinary had finally settled. The questions that had once created fear had been replaced by quiet confidence. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often begins when we stop fearing the truth and begin living by it. That morning they prepared breakfast slowly. There was no rushing. No anxious thoughts. Only gratitude. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window while sunlight stretched across the wooden table. For years they believed happiness would arrive after every uncertainty disappeared. Now they understood something completely different. Peace is not found in having every answer. Peace is found in knowing that honesty, kindness, and integrity will guide us no matter what tomorrow brings. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting peace comes from the values we live by, not the certainty we possess. After breakfast they reached once more for the familiar notebook. Its worn cover reflected years of reflection. Every page told part of a story. There were pages filled with dreams. Pages filled with disappointment. Pages written through tears. Pages overflowing with gratitude. Questions that once seemed impossible now sat beside lessons learned through patience. Turning each page felt like meeting every version of themselves. The frightened version. The impatient version. The hopeful version. The growing version. And finally, the peaceful version. They smiled gently. The notebook had never predicted the future. Instead, it quietly recorded the journey of one heart learning to replace fear with wisdom. Because your heart needs this right now, because true transformation happens one faithful step at a time. Only one blank page remained. They rested the pen gently against the paper. For several quiet moments, they simply listened to the breeze outside. Then they slowly began writing. Today I understand what truly changed everything. It wasn't discovering a hidden secret. It wasn't hearing dramatic news. It was realizing that truth, when approached with compassion, has the power to heal instead of harm. Understanding another person's heart begins with choosing humility instead of assumptions. Reading those words filled their eyes with quiet tears. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often appears when we recognize how much we have grown. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches stretched toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes moved softly through the leaves. Sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Families gathered beneath the shade. Children laughed while chasing butterflies across colorful gardens. Everything invited reflection. Finding the familiar wooden bench, they quietly sat. This time they weren't searching for answers. They simply appreciated being present. Because your heart needs this right now, because contentment often begins when we stop chasing certainty and start embracing today. Nearby, an elderly craftsman carefully restored an old wooden fence around the community garden. A curious child asked, "Why don't you build a brand new one?" The craftsman smiled warmly. Because strong things deserve the chance to be restored. They may have weathered many storms. They may carry scratches. But that doesn't mean they've lost their value. Those words settled deeply into their heart. People are often like that fence. Relationships are often like that fence. Misunderstandings leave marks. Disappointments leave cracks. Time creates wear. Yet patience, honesty, forgiveness, compassion, and consistent care can restore what once seemed impossible to repair. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing begins when people choose restoration instead of resentment. The afternoon quietly unfolded. Golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. A father patiently helped his daughter learn to ride her bicycle. Every time she lost balance, she stood back up. Each time her father smiled. You didn't fail. You learned something. Watching them reminded the person that healthy relationships are safe places to grow. Not places where perfection is expected, but places where mistakes become opportunities to learn together. Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement often strengthens people far more than criticism. Later they wandered through the flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender bloomed beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "Do flowers all bloom at the same time?" The gardener smiled kindly. "No. But every flower deserves patience." Those simple words quietly settled into their heart. People also grow differently. Some heal quickly. Others slowly. Some trust easily. Others need reassurance. Kindness respects those differences. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows wherever patience is practiced. Returning one final time to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook to its last page. Slowly they wrote, "Today I release fear. I release unnecessary judgment. I release the need to understand everything immediately. Instead, I choose honesty. I choose humility. I choose compassion. I choose forgiveness. I choose gratitude. I choose hope." Reading those words brought quiet peace unlike anything they had experienced before. They realized the greatest burden had never been uncertainty. The greatest burden had been believing they needed certainty before choosing kindness. Because your heart needs this right now, because kindness is always a choice we can make, even when every answer hasn't arrived. As afternoon slowly became evening, the golden sunset painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange, pink, violet, and gold. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the peaceful lake, they reflected one final time on the title of this story. Don't skip. Your soulmate just heard the truth about you, and it changed everything. A gentle smile crossed their face. The greatest truth had never been a shocking revelation. It wasn't a hidden mystery. It wasn't a prediction. The real truth was beautifully simple. When someone chooses to look beyond assumptions. When someone notices quiet acts of kindness. When someone values integrity over appearances. Everything changes. Not because another person becomes different, but because understanding replaces misunderstanding. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine relationships grow stronger when people seek truth with empathy. As evening settled across the neighborhood, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time, they carefully wrote, "If this journey has taught me anything, it is this. Never assume you know someone's whole story. Take time to understand. Never allow fear to speak louder than kindness. Choose compassion. Never underestimate the power of one honest conversation. It can heal misunderstandings that silence never could. Never wait too long to express appreciation. People deserve to know they matter." They paused before writing one final reflection. "Tomorrow remains unwritten, but I no longer fear it." Whether life brings joyful celebrations, difficult conversations, unexpected challenges, or quiet ordinary mornings, I choose to meet each day with honesty, humility, patience, gratitude, forgiveness, and hope. Those values may not remove every obstacle, but they will guide every step I take and help me build relationships rooted in trust, respect, and genuine love. They gently closed the notebook. The journey had reached its final page. Outside, countless stars shimmered across the peaceful night sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many years, they no longer feared what the truth might reveal. Because they had discovered the greatest truth of all. The strongest relationships are not built on dramatic revelations or perfect circumstances. They are built through everyday honesty, patient listening, quiet integrity, mutual respect, compassion freely given, forgiveness sincerely offered, and the courage to see one another with understanding instead of assumption. The room became still. The stars filled the night sky. With a peaceful smile, they turned off the light, ready to welcome tomorrow, not with fear, but with wisdom, kindness, gratitude, and hope.